Bibles, turn to, we're going to look at two spots, Deuteronomy chapter 21 and Matthew chapter 11. Need to go to Deuteronomy in order to help make sense of Matthew chapter 11. Now, the subject I want to preach on today is probably one that is brought up to preachers in a more humorous way at times, or in a malicious way, maybe even sometimes, and it's the topic of gluttony. I'm sure the preachers that are in here have heard, you never hear a message on gluttony. And I remember a young man telling me one time, he said, you know what you don't ever hear preachers preach on? Gluttony. Couple of things with that. One, before I sound like I'm putting off on him too much, in case he should ever watch, I'm not naming him, so it doesn't matter in that sense, but he's a solid young man. He has really got a great heart for the Lord. One thing I would commend this young man about is he looks past the faults of those that are fallen and tries to restore them. And that is a biblical principle. Most people, we see somebody that falls and we just leave them there. We don't go after trying the restoration side of it's not there. So I'll give him credit on that. But in a humorous thing, it was kind of funny because he brought that up the one time, and I thought, you are all of like 16 years old and you run marathons. You're skinny. You know, you say that, I get what you're trying to say. You're looking at some of the preachers or not. I remember one day after he got married, when he came in, I mentioned he had gotten married, and he came in and he was not as slim as he used to be. I assumed from that his wife is a very good cook, and that life has changed and slowed down just a little. And but yet he had not probably changed his eating habit. I guess my point to that is this: is not everybody that has a little bit of weight on them, and I shared that with him, is because they're gluttonous. I told him I would be very careful going up to some ladies, especially if they have maybe a thyroid problem. You might get knocked out or something. But the topic of gluttony, if I had a thought for this, I'd say it shows up sooner or later. Gluttony, as I mentioned to him, is far more than just overeating. It's far more than that. That's just the simplest way to bring the principle of gluttony across, is to focus on the area of overeating, because it does show up. Either shows up in the waistline, or it shows up in y'all do not look as happy as I hope. Some of y'all are smiling, but you're looking like you just went to the doctor's visit or something. I'm not here for an exam or anything, but anyhow, it shows up either in the waistline, or later on it shows up in the blood work. Some people can hide it well, some people can't. You ever met somebody and they tell you how much they weigh, and you go, no way, surely not that guy. He doesn't even look like he weighs that much. Usually they're stockier built and stuff, and it's easier to hide it. Well, anyhow, gluttony is not just about food. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 18 through 21. If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him, will not hearken unto them, then his father and his mother, then shall his father and mother lay hold on him and bring him out unto the elders of his city, and unto the gate of his place. And they shall say unto the elders of this city, this is our son, or this our son is stubborn and rebellious, and will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and drunkard. And all the men of that city shall stone him with stones, that he die. So shalt thou put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. The point of it, them doing it back then, was a brutal reminder of sin and its problems, and to put it out to bring a sense of fear upon the people for doing sin. That way, in doing so, you'd have a more righteous nation. Now we know that that's not going to be always what works or changes it. I get it. A lot of that was to be a schoolmaster and to teach us. The law was to be a schoolmaster and teach us. But I brought this up because in chapter 11, we see how it's used in Matthew chapter 11. We see how it's used against the Lord. And Christ begins to show us some of the other issues with it. I'm trying not to get ahead of myself here. Chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass, when Jesus had made an end of commanding his 12 disciples, he departed thence to each and to preach in," notice, "their cities." They were to be brought out in the last one into the gates of their own cities. Now, when he's getting done commanding them, read this again at the last part of 11. "He departed thence to teach and to preach in their cities." He's taking them to their cities now. He's going, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's move on. I know I'll end up getting ahead of it, and it won't, it'll take let's just go. Verse 2, it says, "Now when John had heard in the prison the works of Christ, he sent 2 of his disciples and said unto him, Art thou he that should come, or do we look for another?" John there, my opinion, was struggling, making sure that he was struggling with, did I get it right? I try not to ever sound too hard on anybody who struggles with their salvation. Many, many people do. Plenty don't. Plenty never have. I find a lot of people that got saved extremely young and brought up in a really good home, they don't always see the great change in their life, but they need to look at all the things that they've avoided, that God has burdened them and led them away from, as opposed to the person who got saved in a prison house after a 12 sheet long record, and they can look back at all and they can say, I can tell you there was a difference in me. I can tell you what the Lord's done for me, because they know all what they've gotten into. But John here, before anybody criticizes him too much, he's about to have his head cut off. Things are not looking real good for the home team there. John's about to die, so he's asking this question, making sure he gets it right. Jesus answered and said unto him in verse 4, unto them, Go and show John again those things which you do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk, and the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached unto them. I love the fact that the Lord doesn't leave anybody without an answer when it comes to salvation. The Spirit, capital S, beareth witness with our spirit, little less, that we are the children of God. If a person struggles with it, all they need to do is go to God. Talk to him about it. He will reveal to you the truth of that question. He'll show you. And even in here, he does. He gives him the answer that will help John to understand in the greatest way needed for John, that John, you got it right. I'm he that should come. Don't look for another. And in verse 6 he says, And blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. And as they departed, Jesus began to say unto the multitudes concerning John. Now here's where he's going to start to deal with, here's where we get a connection to what's going on in the Old Testament, here in the New Testament. And he's starting to point out, remember they had that if it was a disobedient child, the parents had to bring him? Well, the people that went after Christ, they didn't go to his parents and get his permission yet. They didn't wait for the parents to bring them out, because Christ's parents knew he was doing the will of God. But they had a gluttonous problem. Their gluttonous problem was power. They wanted authority, and they wanted control, and they wanted it more so much that they couldn't even see the truth. They couldn't hear the truth anymore. They had no desire for truth. They only had a desire for self-gain and self-promotion and for power. That's why later we'll see he says, He that hath an ear to hear. They didn't want to hear. They didn't want the truth. You ever met somebody, you try to tell them the truth, and you can tell at some point it's falling on them. We even have sayings for it. It's falling on what? Deaf ears. It's a waste of your time. They do not have ears to hear. That refers to the heart. It gets to the heart of the matter. If you have ears to hear, you want to hear, there's a reason. There's a reason everybody that came out to hear John came out to hear John. There's a reason every time we go to church, it may be duty sometimes. Sometimes it may be more than duty. You ever sat there and just felt like, I need to get to church? Not just I want to get to church, or hey, Isabella, and if she sees this one, she'll be okay with it. Hey, Isabella, come on, we're going to be late. We got to hurry up. We need to get to church. Not that, but you ever felt like, I need to get to church? And I've got to get to church. You're being drawn. Well, let's look on. We're verse 7. And as they began to depart, or as they departed, Jesus began to say unto the multitudes concerning John, what went ye out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken with the wind? The reason he made that statement is the word gluttonous back in the Old Testament. I'm going to read you some definitions. I'm going to give you some personal definitions that I've learned and kind of put together through Scripture over the years. And anyhow, the word there means to shake. The word glutton in the Old Testament meant to shake. Figuratively, it meant to be loose morally, or worthless, or a prodigal, or a riotous eater. And ultimately, what he was saying is, they were, what did you go out to see? A rebellious child? Did you go out to see a gluttonous, a loose living person? Did you go out to see John because he was a spectacle? Did you go out because there was a wild man living out out there and you just wanted to go out and hear what he had to say? That's one reason he gives. What went ye out in the wilderness to see? A reed shaken with the wind? A gluttonous person? What went ye out for to see? A man clothed in soft raiment? Behold, they that wear soft clothing are in kings' houses. And what he's getting out there is, one, did you go out for the spectacle? Is that why you went to see him? Or did you go out? Why would you go out to see somebody that dwelt in kings' houses? Because they commanded you to. So did you go out because you were looking at a spectacle, it was a show? Or did you go out because you were commanded to go? There's a reason you went out, he's reminding them. But what went ye out forth to see? A prophet? Now we're starting to get closer to the truth as to why they went out. But what went ye out for to see? A prophet? Yea, I say unto you, and more than a prophet. For this is he of whom it is written. By the way, if anybody says to you ever, Jesus never claimed to be God in the New Testament, he's doing it right here. He's declaring who he is right here. He does it in many, many spots. This thing that's been going around for probably the last 5 to 10 years, which it went around way before that, but it's just resurfacing of Jesus never claimed to be God. And as we see a greater Muslim population, they're bringing up even more. They love to use it. Am I right? They love to use that argument. Here's one where he is absolutely openly doing it. Now, we may not see this because we don't understand the culture of their culture at the time. But the more you study it and learn the culture, you understand when he said that reed shaking with the wind, you start to connect back to the Old Testament. You start to see he is showing who he is. For this is he of whom it is written, behold, I send my messenger before thy face, which shall prepare thy way before thee. All of a sudden, everybody's starting to get a picture of who this is that's talking to them. Verily I say unto you, among them that are born of woman, there hath not been risen a greater than John the Baptist, notwithstanding that he that is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. I'll stop there for right now. We'll deal with the rest about gluttony next time, but I'll say this. What he's pointing out there is a reason you went out. You were drawn of God. God sent his messenger forth, and all of a sudden your hearts, the nation there was being stirred. Now, their eyes were blinded to it. We understand that. But many of them were being drawn. When we go into the prisons, and men sometimes show up and they say, I don't know, I just came just to get out of myself. I don't buy that a lot of times. They're there because the Holy Spirit of God is drawing them. There's something there, a curiosity. There's some reason that they're there. And it's because God's drawing them, just like every one of us. When we're sitting there and we hear the preaching of God's word, and there's a stirring inside, and we're drawn to something about the message, that's when you need to stop and learn in the service. Put everything else aside. Stop making the notes. Stop being distracted. Stop letting things. God is drawing you to show you something. But if you don't have ears to hear, if you don't prepare yourself mentally for those moments, you won't have an ear to hear. You'll sit there and allow the distractions to come and keep you from what God has. I think sometimes the reason people go through things multiple times in their life is they've never sat still when God was drawing them. They were there for all the wrong reasons and not paying attention to what God had them there for. All right, somebody give us a verse of a song. Or you led singing. Give us a verse of a song.